first here. So Dan Bachman, I practice in Austin, Texas. I have a sports med rehab clinic where we do pre and post-surgical rehab for spine and extremities. So not just like lumbar fusions or discectomies. It's also labral tear repair, ACL reconstruction, Achilles rupture reconstruction, kind of everything. Plantar fasciitis, tennis elbow. Been doing this a long time. I graduated here 19 years ago, like a year. Was I behind or after you?
After me.
After you, yeah. And I teach rehab courses on the ACA platform, the webinar, the online distance learning based platform. I've got a low back rehab protocol on there right now, and shoulder. They want me to do a shoulder rehab protocol coming up in October, I think it will be, in the webinar format. And then I teach live courses around Texas right now, and then we'll be spreading out across. I'm actually working with Dr. Riddle's wife, so I'll be joining their team. And then multiple states, national, and then hopefully some international stuff too. And I've been, a little of my background, I've been a medical director for 2 semi-pro football teams, medical support for MS-150 bike tour. What else? Oh, on the medical team for the AVP Pro Volleyball Tour. So every year they come to Austin, the pro volleyball players, and then I'm in the medical tent for 12 hours a day working on Olympic gold medals, which is awesome. I do get to sit courtside and do courtside medical too, which is also fun. Volleyball is my thing, by the way, so that's what I do in my spare time. Texas Volleyball Tour, which is another local Texas tour. And I created a pre-play injury prevention warm-up program specifically for volleyball athletes that is currently used by UT's men's and women's club volleyball teams. So I got to go teach them how to use my program, which they use to this day, which is also cool to get a chance to do. And I'm a hosting doctor for UT's pre-med student shadowing program. So basically UT has pre-med programs and they have their own medical school as well, which is a relatively recent thing. And they send their pre-med students to me and shadow me. We get a ton of them. We get like 40 plus a year. And we'll have like 4 at a time in my office while I'm doing consults and exams and then racing out of the rehab room, and they just come, they come over and over and seem to enjoy it. I love having them there. And by the way, I'll offer you, I'm in the process of working with Dr. Sheppard to become a preceptor. So that means if you work through him, I welcome any of you guys and ladies who want to come. If you're in the Austin area, definitely come on by. Even if it's an informal thing, you're welcome to hang out. And today, I have a little presentation for you guys. So basically, I designed all my own rehab protocols for spine and extremity. It's one program that adapts to every patient, every condition, every injury. I developed it over a long time. I'll tell you about that. But I want to ask you guys if you had any particular topics you would like to cover, and I can save a little time either toward the end of the hour or at some point. Any burning topics on y'all's minds? And okay, I'll say this too. If something pops up, raise your hand. If you have questions at any point during this, hit me up. And also, if anyone wants to take video, if we end up doing anything afterwards, y'all are welcome to take video. Don't hesitate. So, where my problem started was, like many young docs, when I got out of school, I was very rich in information, and yet felt kind of ill-equipped to handle actual patients. So I had tons of information about physiology, biomechanics, and pathology, and all those things. But when a real live patient sits down in front of me with a hot low back, or maybe they can't even sit, maybe they're leaning off to one side because they're in so much pain, I felt almost completely helpless. I did not even know where to start with them. And this is not just unique to me or to chiropractors. This is all young docs are going to experience this. I felt smart, I didn't feel capable. And I was desperately afraid of being a bad doctor and being an imposter. And this whole thing, the imposter syndrome, is that fear that I'm a fraud. These were my thoughts. So I followed all these experts. You guys have probably heard of these guys. Liebenson, McGill, Cook, you guys know about those, FMS, and Craig Liebeson's functional rehabilitation of the spine. All these folks, and Stuart McGill, fantastic biomechanist, and I felt like they all had a great insight, but it didn't really clarify things much for me. I had a bunch of tools that I didn't know how to rebuild a carburetor with. So I knew how to use a screwdriver and some pliers, but I didn't know how to use them to rebuild a carburetor. That's kind of the analogy I like to use there. And my problems with a lot of the current treatment philosophy out there, and I'm talking mostly about physical therapy because that's where most patients end up going. Hopefully we can change that, y'all. Treatment protocols seem vague and hard to apply in real life. Overly complicated protocols. You know, doing a functional movement evaluation may take 30, 40 minutes or something like that, just for that one thing, not to mention the consult, not to mention any other ortho tests we might do. Results of these treatment protocols, in my experience, sometimes they seemed hit or miss. Like sometimes, oh, this patient got better, then I did it right. I do the same thing with the next patient, they don't get better. Maybe they get worse. I was like, I did everything exactly the same, I followed all the rules, why are we getting different results? And I felt like they didn't address our current PT protocols don't address some of the really important things. So, yes, there's a benefit to being able to resume feeding yourself, dressing yourself, going back to work. That's super important. But what if you've got an athlete? What if they're just a regular person, but they're on a softball team? I mean, those higher levels of performance require additional recovery before you can introduce those things. That's what we call RTP, or return to play. It's its own separate part of rehab. So getting you able to dress yourself, feed yourself, go to work is definitely job one, but getting you the rest of the way, RTP, most of that, and that's not really addressed in a lot of these protocols. Fear of re-injury, which I call the #1 enemy to any recovery from any injury, fear of hurting yourself again. I'm too afraid to do the things that I need to do to get well, therefore I don't get well. Because I'm afraid, well, I'm feeling a little better right now, I don't want to risk hurting worse to do these other things that feel scary or hurt a little bit. Overly reliant on research. Now, don't get me wrong, research is great, it's necessary, it's valuable, but research is often, if you read to the bottom, have y'all read research articles before?
Yes.
Yes. Now, what does it often say at the bottom? More study needed. So what am I supposed to do with that? Or it's overly specific. Maybe it's like, yes, we found that we have a plus or minus margin of error of like 2 to 2.6%, that it might be helpful for treating extensor digitorum profundus tendinopathies. I'm like, okay, so do I just wait until I get someone with that problem and then I can do that thing? Or does it apply to any other body parts? It's hard to say, it's unclear. How much do environmental or systemic factors play into musculoskeletal problems? Not really addressed. Are they hydrated? Are they low on sleep? Do they have thyroid issues? If so, should I charge these things? Should I charge at these things first? Or how should I weight all these other factors? And research, by necessity, lags innovation. In order to study something, you have to have the idea first. That's the innovation, right? So by the time a research study comes out, that thing has been going on for, who knows, a decade or more. And that means the cool stuff right now, I don't know about because it hasn't been researched yet. And cookie cutter programs. Everyone from a grandma to an Olympic athlete gets the same set of stuff. No matter what their injury, the Olympic athlete starts with, seated knee extensions with no resistance, or band walks. Where that might be great for the grandma, why are you starting the athlete on that? They can start way up higher. They're much more capable. So I felt like it was not customized enough. Overly cautious approaches in PT protocols. Being afraid of hurting the patient. You don't want to hurt the patient, but you can overdo it that way too. These are all my long list of grievances. So, it's my rant. And no clear desired outcome. How do we know when they're well? I mean, a patient's coming to you to get well. We want to get them well. How do we know when they're well? So, I built my own philosophy. And I started from scratch. And flash forward to after it's built, these are the results. It is a comprehensive musculoskeletal rehab philosophy. It addresses all body parts, all people, all injuries. Little to no equipment needed. I don't need a room full of fancy equipment, and I don't have one. You should see my rehab room. It's got like foam rollers, stability pads, bands, Swiss balls, lacrosse ball. That's pretty much it. And we rehab all those things I just told you with those tools. And these applies to all patients, and it eliminates all the noise. So let's say you have a patient who comes in and says, "Doc, yesterday my pain was right here, now it's right here." What does that mean? Well, the answer is it doesn't matter. If there's no trauma between yesterday and today, the location of the pain, the quality of the pain doesn't matter. It used to be burning, now it's kind of stiff. What does that mean? Probably nothing. So we eliminate all the noise and we go right to the good stuff that needs to be fixed, and then we can measure our results once we do. Now, I track my results with the patient-specific functional scale, PSFS. Now, it's a super easy tool to use. I know you guys have all seen probably the neck oswestry and the Roland Morris back thing and all that stuff. Have you guys had a chance to try using those things yet? Mm-hmm. Are they cumbersome as hell? And patients hate them, and doctors hate them. Yes, they're validated, and you can measure a big group of people with those things, or measure someone against a group, but it's unwieldy. So the PSFS, which I'll go over with you in a second, is what I use on the advice of Cheryl Hawk. She's here, right?
Yes.
So I asked her, I said, "I think my rehab protocol is better than everyone else's, but I'm not sure. How do I prove that? Or disprove that?" She said, "Use this tool." Now, I've tracked the last 150 new patients I've had, and the average is 83% functional improvement in 2.5 visits with this protocol. And that's all injuries. That's, again, shoulders, knees, hips, ankles, feet, back, spine, neck, all that stuff. And also this allows you to expand your practice by adding in other body parts that you might not otherwise have considered. Like, we're spine guys, right? We're spine folks. But what if your patient comes in with a meniscus tear or a partial rotator cuff tear? We feel less confident, typically. I know I did, dealing with those things. Plantar fasciitis. So the more conditions you can treat, the more patients you can see, the more times a patient will come back to you if they have a different injury. And it gets you a reputation. So in Austin, where I live, there are many, many chiropractors. I am the top rated one on Yelp and Google. I attribute that to using this program. Just because you get a reputation as someone that gets well people fast and consistently. And this stuff is not, you don't have to refer back to notes. Once you get it, it makes sense. You can just apply it with every patient and see your results. Now, I'm going to go kind of quickly through how I reverse engineered this program and just see if it makes sense to you guys. So, first of all, what are we working with as docs? Our scope is musculoskeletal, essentially. We'll include neuro in there too, right? Associated nerves. Muscle, joint, ligament, tendon, cartilage, nerves. Essentially, moving parts is our world, right? Including extremities. They get left off. What are the tools we have? These are the 5 tools I use, only these 5 tools. There are many more tools, but these are the ones I use because I find them most effective in getting me toward those numbers you saw. Adjustments, spinal mandibular therapy, stretches, exercise, massage, and then environmental lifestyle stuff. Why not others? They may be useful, but they are less powerful tools in my experience. I'm always looking for new ones that are more powerful that I can add to my group. I only want the stuff that works best and most reliably and consistently. So I started with the hypothesis that all moving parts problems are easy to fix. Because I was desperate. I was like, if I'm going to build my own thing, why not start with a hypothesis that, if correct, is awesome on the other end. So I just kind of winged it and started with this. And I said, well, if that was true, then there must only be a few causes for pain everywhere. everywhere. Those causes must be easy to find. The tools must be easy to use, and that includes by the patient. And these tools will work quickly. And if that's true, if there are only a few causes, then all MSK problems must have some deficits in common. Because there can't be a whole bunch of different causes, so that means they have a few in common, which means I only have to look for a few things. By the way, I'll say this, there is still, I'm not saying there's no place for ortho tests and all that stuff. I do all that stuff, but I start by focusing mostly on these areas that we're going to talk about. So keep learning everything you're learning, definitely. If they're easy to find, I don't need fancy equipment. I don't need extraordinary skill to find them. And even patients can find them once they know what to look for. Again, this is all my hypothesis. And if the tools are easy to use, don't need a big fancy room of rehab equipment, which I don't have. The patient doesn't need those things either. And what does that leave us with? Low-tech, no-tech stuff. Cheap to free. And stuff that's already laying around. They may already have the stuff, or their gym does. And there we go. So, if we're looking for deficits that all musculoskeletal problems have in common, here's just a list of some problems that happen in the MSK field world. What might all of those have in common? And it's daunting. I mean, they're all over the place. Frozen shoulder, rotator cuff impact, disc herniation, ACL, on and on and on. And that's just a short list of things you can have wrong with them. So, my conclusion, to skip to the end, the two problems they all have in common are mobility problems, and that can be too much or too little. Frozen shoulder is an example of too little mobility, right? Rotator cuff tear or slap tear, superior labor AP tear, that is too much mobility. Joint becomes sloppy, less able to protect itself. Stability problems, the muscles whose job it is to protect the joint can't. And by the way, going back to mobility, I say basically we are a chain of moving parts, and each part has a normal range that it should be able to move through. If we can move through a normal range, we're less likely to get hurt. If we can't move through a normal range, then by definition, we are being forced to move abnormally, which just means it's easier to hurt yourself. So as an example, if I should have 90 degrees of hip flexion, passive hip flexion, and only have 3 degrees, how is that going to affect my squat form, do you think? Is it going to help it? Is it going to hurt it? Is it going to have no change on my squat form? Yes. And if I can only bend my hip that much, and I try to do the squat, I'm going to injure some other part as a result of that abnormal movement that I'm forced to do. And the peronei, their job is to keep your ankle from rolling if it starts to roll, right? So if you sprain your ankle, that means they failed to do that. That is an example of the muscles whose job it was to protect that joint failing, and these are my 2 categories. Now, if we look just at mobility problems, you can have too much or too little. We gave those examples. I skipped ahead here. By the way, in the mobility problem category, almost all of them are going to be too little mobility. You'll get a few tears here and there, but the huge majority of these kinds of problems you're going to see are going to be too little, too stiff. And in the stability problem side, primary protection for all joints head to toe comes from the muscles whose job is to protect us. Muscles are smart supports. They can react to something. And ligaments and tendons, or ligaments and cartilage and menisci and discs, they're dumb supports. They cannot react to anything, right? They're just a rope that ties 2 bones together. So we need ligaments, but they are just the, if everything else fails, hopefully this will work support. And muscles can be trained. They can be made stronger, so they can withstand greater loads and prevent injury. They can be trained to react faster, like your peronei. You can train those to fire faster. If they fire too slow, you start to roll your ankle, they engage, but too late, you already sprained your ankle. We can train them to fire faster and more appropriately when needed. The balance challenges in that example. So ligaments, last line of defense, if you sprain something, your dynamic smart support system failed, by definition. Two main causes of pain break down to tight things and weak things. And when I tell patients this, and I do, they get it. So that's another advantage. If you want patients to do what you tell them, and you say, you got some tight things that force you to move abnormally and make it more likely to hurt. You got some weak things, the muscles whose job is to protect you can't and allow pain to happen. So the solution is, we got to loosen tight things and strengthen weak things. They're like, that makes sense. They're going to get it. They're going to do what you tell them. Yeah, and of those two things, tight things, 80% of the problem. Mobility problems are 80%, this is my made up number, but you'll find in practice, it's pretty much, if someone walks in with pain, they've got tight stuff across the board. They may have some weak things too, but of those two contributors, tight and weak, tight things are this much of the problem. And let's look at tools that fix tight things. There are only three powerful ones. There are only three that I use. Stretches, they lengthen the muscles that are shorter ropes than they should be. Stretches lengthen ropes. Massage can break up scar tissue or adhesions that can kind of glue things together, keep them from moving normally. Adjustments, yes, there are many other benefits for adjustments. I treat them like WD-40 for the spine. So I'm not denying other things. I'm saying this is the way I use this particular tool, and it works amazing. So if I see a patient who should be able to turn their head 90 degrees, they can only turn 30, and I adjust them and they can move 60, that's what it's for. That's what I use it for. And only one tool fixes weak things, right? Exercise. So I tell them, we're just going to plug in a few exercises that I think you've been missing. They're like, let's go. And here's where you run into problems. So here are our tools. Let's look at stretches. Which stretches should they do? How many stretches exist? Millions, maybe? I mean, we could all invent a weird stretch. Which of those are the best ones for them? How aggressively should they hold the stretch? Do you guys get talked about, does anyone talk to you all about how aggressively a patient should hold a stretch or one should hold a stretch?
Yes.
What are the guidelines?
PFS should be 100% of effort. PNS should be.
How about for a passive stretch?
They talk about it shouldn't hurt, it should be a light stretch, it shouldn't hurt.
So I will predict with those instructions if it shouldn't hurt, because remember, pain falls on a spectrum from barely perceptible to unbearable. It's all pain. A bruise is painful and a broken arm is, but they're both painful. But if I say no pain, no, you shouldn't feel any pain, they're hardly going to be giving themselves any stretch at all. You want to know what my directions are for all my patients when they do stretches? Barely tolerable. Barely tolerable means you can last the whole clock for that stretch, but you are miserable the whole time. That's what I tell them. And also I tell them, the only reason you are doing this stretch is to increase range of motion where it's lacking. Therefore, that is the only metric we care about. Every single day, your range of motion should increase. As long as that is happening, you're doing it right. If it is not happening, then one of these other categories is not being met. How often should stretches be done? Did they talk to you all about that? Frequency? Once? Okay, that's good. I'll say that. 1 to 3 times a day. And we talk about intensity, duration. How long should a stretch be held? 30 seconds. My shortest stretch is 1 minute. My longest stretch is 4 minutes. Why is that though? Yes, plastic versus elastic deformation from physics all the way back then. So you can deform tissue in 2 ways. Elastic deformation, which is the rubber band that I pull apart, let it snap back, it snaps back to the same length it was before. That's elastic. Plastic deformation, if I take that same rubber band and hold it enough tension long enough The fibers in that rubber band will gap, and when it snaps back, it will be a longer band than it was when I started. That's all I care about if we're trying to increase range of motion. So time in stretch matters a ton for that. So a 20-second stretch. So if you ever have patients, and you will, who say, man, you've got really limited hip flexion. Doc, I stretch every day, and I feel a little looser that day, but the next day I'm at the same place. That's why. It's either not long enough, not aggressive enough, or not frequently enough. You could do it aggressively enough and long enough, but if you only do that stretch once a month, 0 results. So the recipe of instructions you give them matters a ton. Massage. There are many tools for massage. I use no additional tools other than my onboard tools. This is my favorite tool, by the way. Elbows never get tired. I can lean on you all day. What techniques? Myofascial release, active release. It goes on and on. Swedish, Rusty, right? Location, intensity, duration. What is the desired effect? That's what I always go back to. What are we trying to accomplish with this thing? I want to know before I use it so I can tell if we do it. Otherwise, I'm just kind of throwing some stuff at them and just like hoping that they're going to feel better. If they do feel better, I don't know why. Because I didn't have a goal, I didn't find a deficit that I'm trying to fix that I can measure when it is better. So all I care about are knowing the desired effects so that I can see if it's occurring or not. What about exercises? There's a million of those. Which are the best ones? Where should they start? You can have super easy exercise, bands around the ankle that they're walking like this, right? Or you can have super complicated exercises. You can have Turkish get-ups and muscle ups, all that stuff. So you got a spectrum there too. Which ones are on that list? Where do you start the patient on that spectrum? And how do you know when to progress them? So these are all questions that have to be answered. It can't just be, go do some exercise. And of course, lifestyle changes. We talked about those as well. How important is sleep posture to their neck pain? Could be huge. How about their keyboarding posture? Massive. The longer they spend at the keyboard, the more important a likely contributor it is. So the dose of that thing that they're doing is what matters. It's not dangerous for me to do this right now. If I do it for 8 hours a day for 4 years, it's going to be have a considerably bigger effect. So weighing the importance of the contributor matters a ton. So my current iteration of this program is the result of 15 years of testing this stuff, refining it, polishing it, and just simplifying it down to like real basic elements. And this tool we're talking about, here's how it works. You don't even need a sheet of paper for it. If you guys do EHR charting, is that right? Yeah?
Yes.
What program do y'all use? How do y'all like it?
Dr. Sheppard.
I mean, there's a learning curve on all these things.
I'll be honest.
Yeah, okay, we got a thumbs down. So, I'm not here to sell you one at all. I use Practice Fusion. I've been using it for about 8 years now. Love it, but there are, I'm sure, many other great ones too. But my point being, you can chart this in your notes while you're taking the patient encounter, when you're taking their history. All it is I ask the patient, what are the 3 things you're most limited from doing because of your pain? They will know. I'm here to tell you, they will be like, oh, doc, it's putting on my pants and shoes and socks in the morning if they have back pain, getting up and down from a chair, in and out of a car, bending forward with the weight. It could be things like washing your hands, brushing your teeth, getting laundry out, anything with us bent forward, right? So you get the ones that they are most limited from. My wife had to put my socks on today. Or I couldn't, I can't stand up straight, or I can't walk more than 5 minutes. So you get the list of those 3 things, and you have them score them from 0 to 10. 0, I can't do that thing at all. 10, I can do it as easily as I ever have. And, so the lower the number, the worse they are. You add those together and average them. So let's say their first 3 numbers were 2, 3, and 4, for their 3 things. Average is a 3, right? So that's their beginning one. And then you take a second assessment of those same things when you release them from care. And let's say it was 7, 8, and 9. So it averages an 8. So they went from a 3 to an 8. So they've improved 5 kind of functional percentage points. So you can actually measure how much, and this is from, I'm getting ahead of myself here. This is what the actual form looks like. So this here says, tell the patient to point at a number. I just say, tell me a number. And then it gives you a way to do that. Also, there's some research on it. It shows that, get this, it's a valid, reliable, and responsive outcome measure for patients with back, neck, knee, and upper extremity. That's all us, right? All our stuff. Also been shown to have a high test retest reliability in both generic low back pain and knee dysfunction. That's kind of almost everything. Also, they found with cervical radiculopathy, it found high test retest reliability when compared to the neck disability index, which all of us hate. This takes about 2 minutes to do. How long do that neck disability index? Again, not detracting from the usefulness of those other tools. But hey, if we can accomplish the same thing in 2 minutes instead of 20 or 10, I'm going to use that one. Now, here's what it looks like in my chart notes. On the left is a beginning or a first visit. On the right is a release visit. And you will notice the dates. 6/3, that's June 3rd, June 7th. That was my release day. Their entry, if you go down the bottom, I just wrote in PSFS scores. Sleep was a 1.5, putting on pants, shoes, and socks 1.5, getting out of the car 2.5. The way I get the half is because the patient will often say, oh, it's about a 1 or 2, so I just split it. They don't tell you, they almost never will say, it's about a 2.37. They won't say that, but I'll just average what they've done. Release, 8, 7.5, 8.5. And then you'll see this is my subjective section on the top. I put this in subjective. So in this way, yes, this is the patient telling me something. I didn't measure anything on them, but in this way, subjective findings, the patient telling me something is a form of objective finding as well. They are just reporting their improvement in function, which function is an objective or measurable thing. Plus, I can see them getting up from a chair. And I can see that they're not crooked anymore. So, does that make sense? That even though this is technically a subjectively reported thing, the patient's telling me this, I'm not measuring anything with a goniometer, this is a form of, not completely, but I consider it to be a form of objective finding as well. I know some of this may be heresy. I apologize. I'm not going to do everything your instructors tell you. Do everything your instructors tell you for sure. And because I'm a nerd, I track it all in a spreadsheet. So across the top, I have categories. Chief complaint, here's what they came in for. And you'll see neck pain, scap, hip, back, rib, shoulder, scap, knee, psoas, headache, blah, 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 sciatica, foot drop. So then, and there's the date they came in, and then there are their 3 active, you can't see my dot, but 3 activities with their scores, the initial score, and then the visit. I don't know if you can see this. This is the follow-up happened at visit number what? 4, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2. So that's when I'm releasing the patient. My average treatment, the average number of visits the patient sees me is 2.5, which I know is different than most physical therapists or chiropractors. But if I get that, so let me just bring this up. How am I going to make money like this?
Just bring in reputations.
Yes, that leads to that. Reputation brings in more patients. So last week, well, let's see. How many new patients does an average chiropractor see in say a week? Do you know, Doc, or have an idea?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it depends, but probably like 4, 5, 6, somewhere in that neighborhood.
I would think that's probably true. Last week I had 22 new patients. 22. I see a minimum of 60 and a max of like 60 to 80 new patients a month. Now, yes, it feels scary releasing someone after 2 to 3 visits. Because you're like, how do I know more are going to come in? Well, you kind of have to just hope and pray and make sure they fill out reviews for you online, and they will rave about you. And then everyone wants to come see you. Now, I'll tell you the other thing that's going to happen is once you get that reputation, you're going to start getting more and more complicated cases. So now I get patients who've been to the Mayo Clinic and they couldn't fix them. They've been to a PT 3 times. They've had epidural steroid injections. They've had a surgery that failed and 2 rehab sessions after that failed. They've been to a Rosti. They've been to 3 other chiropractors, acupuncture, cupping, all that stuff. And now they're with me. And you know what I tell those patients? You're my favorite kind of patient because no one else can fix you. And that means when I fix you, I get to be the hero. I mean, you get well, yeah, but I mean, I get to be the hero. So, but that's the fun part. Yes, it's more work. Yes, it's scarier. But it forces you to use your diagnostic detective mind better and become a better diagnostician. So Dr. House, MD, right? What's he famous for? Finding all the rare, weird, quirky diseases and catching them quickly when everyone else can't do it, right? I want to be the Dr. House of musculoskeletal problems. And to do that, I have to be a good detective. So I treat injury, patient's injury is the crime. The patient is the victim of that crime. The patient is also the only eyewitness to that crime. But they don't know what they saw, what they saw is important. So it's my job to get that from them and assemble a suspect, which is the injury, and prosecute that subject, or the suspect, with treatment, and solve the crime by restoring them to normal health. It's really like that, because you and the patient will be sitting there. I mean, sometimes they'll be like, right in front of them, I'll be, man, that does not make any sense. And it makes you look at other possible causes. So sometimes, most of the time, using my method here that I just outlined, tight things and weak things, that's going to fix about 80% of your patients. There's still, or maybe more, 80 to 90, let's say. So you still got a 10 to 20% in there that don't respond right away. That's when you have to look outside of this super simple group of tight things and weak things for other possible contributors. Like we were saying, maybe they're sleep deprived. If they're not sleeping enough, or quality sleep, nighttime's when our body does all its healing. It's repairing the wear and tear from the day, it's restocking the shelves of all the nutrients we burned during the day, it's resolving the psychological stress of the day. If we don't get enough sleep, none of that happens, and it just piles up. So it doesn't matter what therapies I do to them, if they're getting 3 hours of sleep a night, they're not going to get better. So if we identify that, let's fix this thing and see if we start moving the needle. So that gets into the fun stuff. It is the perfect treat. The PSF is a perfect tool because it tracks the thing the patient cares most about. The reason they came in to see you is because they can't function. We are measuring function and specifically saying, this is the thing I want to see improve. So that they know, hey, this doc is on my side. He wants the exact same thing I want. So I'm going to do exactly what he says. Oh, and it's easy to track. All right, so that's done. That's me done with my little thing here. By the way, here's all my contact info. Use it. If you get in clinic and you have cases or you have methods or anything like that you have questions about, hit me up. I've also got, there's my cell, my email, my seminar list there, Instagram. I'm going to start putting a lot more content on there, by the way. But I welcome you guys to jump in or tag me with anything that looks interesting to you. I have a YouTube channel where I post, it's basically an injury and recovery YouTube channel. So I answer all the most common questions patients have about all kinds of stuff. So things I find myself saying over and over, I turn into a video. They're all like 3 to 5 minutes, they're short. It's also an Ask the Doc YouTube channel. So if anyone, including y'all, have a question, leave your question as a comment, I'll shoot you a video answer. And then I'll tag you.
For patients that you were saying, you found that they aren't getting enough sleep, do you work with that through nutrition or do you send them out? How do you work for the sleep?
That's a great question. So it depends. So I don't want to just say, go get a prescription for Ambien automatically. But I may say, have you tried the sleep aid before? If not, have you tried some of the natural versions of those, which there's one I always forget. So of course, there's a couple.
Melatonin?
Melatonin, yes, and then there's another one, root of some kind. Valerian, thank you. I heard it stinks. But I would say those things are worth trying for sure first. And also it may be try, how much time are you spending in bed? And if they're only going to, if they're only in bed for 5 hours, you can say, hey, you have to have more sleep. You have to find a way to be in bed at least at 8 hours. And even if they're not sleeping, even if they're sleeping poorly, 8 hours of poor sleep is way better than 3 hours of poor sleep. So that can be enough. So just improving something enough for their body to kick in and be able to start healing. I don't refer out to nutritionists a lot. One reason is I don't have a great one that I'm real happy with. I try to emphasize getting their nutrients through food. Food has the best, most well-rounded versions of the non-synthetic versions. I know Standard Process has whole food supplements, which if they were going to do supplements, I would say whole food for sure. Because nature tends to balance all these things, these competitive minerals that if you take too much of one, it lowers the other one. Nature balances all that for you. It's really hard to OD on spinach and carrots. You can OD if you're taking just hyperdoses of superdoses of stuff. Yes, ma'am. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
How long are your patient visits typically?
I'm sorry?
How long are your patient visits typically?
Another great question. So new patients, 45 minutes. That's consult, exam, first treatment. Established patients, 15.
Is it 15 with you, or do you have?
Yes. So it's 15 FaceTime.
Okay.
So I bring them into my office. We do a little brief catch-up history on them. I do any manual work with them, and I run out to my rehab room with them, get them started on their rehab, and then bring the next patient in while they're finishing. So there's overlap. So I don't have to wait till one is completely done before I can bring the next one out, overlap, so I can see more patients that way. And still, everyone gets 15 minutes to themselves.
So I know in the presentation you outlined, so just to make it be clear, like Easton, ultrasound, all that stuff, like you're not using any of that?
I had it all. I had a decompression table, ultrasound, E-stim, Russian, all that stuff I had. And then when I found, hey, these other tools are working better, I sold all that stuff. Again, they have a place, they have usefulness, but if their usefulness is I'm finding to be this, and the other is to this, then every time I use a less powerful tool, I am delaying recovery for that patient.
And just to rebut, what's your go-to? Do you just use a combination of the things that you already said, or is it something that you go through muscle work always?
Oh yeah, so you're asking the right question. So how do we know when we use these things, right? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah.
So 1 second, I saw one over there. So basically, if I see limited mobility, say hip flexion is 45 degrees passive, my rule is 90 has to feel easy to them. So if they have 45, they're like, okay, stop. Then I'm going to give them a hamstring stretch daily until 90 is easy, and then touch up for life. That's what I tell them. Because muscles will get shorter. I will also check their hips, because tight hip and thigh muscles, #1 cause for back pain. Again, in my experience, I'm not quoting research. This is my practice-based evidence, not evidence-based, it's practice-based evidence. So if I find painful, if it hurts to poke around there, to me, that's my rule, they need massage. If there's a spot that hurts to poke on, it can benefit from massage. We do massage, session over session, it should hurt less to do. That's the proof you're fixing that problem. Once it no longer hurts to do, don't need it anymore, but you got to check it periodically to see if new sore spots pop up. If so, do that massage. So stretching and massage are both tools that will tell you if you need that tool. If you're not sure if you need to stretch, you try to stretch. Is my range of motion normal and easy? Don't need it. If it's not, do it daily until it is. Massage, does it hurt to poke on a spot? No, don't need it. Yes, do it on this, I say every 3 days until it isn't. Yes?
So have you noticed, can you overstretch, or is the
Yes.
muscle weaker when you stretch it too much?
Less about weakness, although that is a thing. It's typically not a dangerous thing. You talk about the USA track and field study? Yeah. So we're talking about pre-play static stretching, right before play. USA track and field found that their track athletes were slower if they static stretched right before an event. Now, right before, I would say within an hour. I mean, if you're doing it that morning and then you've got an event that afternoon, that's fine. They don't offer an explanation as to why that is the case in the study. My theory is that their springs have been stretched out and are less springy, and then they go try to bounce off those springs on the track, and they're just kind of, they're not springy enough. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a temporary effect. So stretching pre-play is not dangerous. It just adds no injury prevention benefit to do it right before play. They found that. And it can reduce performance. So if they do need to stretch, after a workout is best because their muscles are already warm, and warm muscles are like taffy, they're more elastic as opposed to cold muscles, which are stiff and brittle. So they'll just get a more comfortable, more effective stretch when they're warm than cold. Having said that, sometimes I'll roll out of bed, feel a little stiff, and do a stretch that morning. I won't get as big a stretch, but I'll get some relief and get some benefit.
So when you're stretching like the muscle, is it, so when you're stretching the muscle, is that like all you do, you're just trying to loosen it up, or are you like trying to teach the functional movements again with that muscle?
So then so the intent of a stretch,
Right.
just range of motion.
Right.
That's all I can. And again, I'm not saying there are no other effects. I'm saying my only purpose for using it is
But like
to.
after the stretch, do you do anything after that? Or
If they need strengthening, then I'll do that in addition. So each of these things, flexibility and stability, are their own separate categories of problem if they exist. So if they need flexibility work and they need strengthening, I will give them the tools that fix those things, regardless of the other, whatever's going on in the other category. They need exercises. If they've got weak lower abs and they've got a sway back, I will give them flat back exercises. If they got stiff hamstrings, I'll give them hamstring stretches. And each of them have their own schedule, kind of independent of each other. Thought I saw someone right now? Yes?
How do you decide off of the PSFS when they have improved? Because I was looking at your numbers and not all of them were 100%. So how do you know when to
That's an
release?
excellent question. Why release them early, right? The reason I release them at 80%, here's what my report of findings sounds like. You can hear the whole thing. I like everything, after I get done with the exam, I like everything I'm seeing. I don't see anything scary. I think it'll be super easy to fix. I see two kinds of problems that are both very fixable: tight things and weak things. Tight things limit mobility, force you to move abnormally. Weak things, missing the protection that can allow injury to happen. Solution: loosen tight things, strengthen weak things. I'm going to predict that we can get you at least 80% better in 3 sessions. You'll be equipped to get the remaining progress on your own. And most importantly, you'll be equipped to not need me again. No offense, I want to see less of you. That's literally what I say. And I say, I will further predict that you have significant improvement in 2 sessions or less. And that means significant to you. So if you and I get 2 sessions in and you feel like, hey, I'm starting to feel better, great, we'll do 1 more. If that does not happen, we will change course until we do get you on the right path. But I think you're going to do great. And I'm usually right. Now, every once in a while, I'm not as certain. And I say we do a 2-session clinical trial. If what I do can help you, we will know in that time because you will have significant improvement. If you do, great. If you don't, we're going to do this other thing. Like it may be MRI or a massage session or referral to an internist or an endocrinologist. Whatever I think my backup DX is. Like on my differential list. Is there something? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you empower them to do it at home, essentially. You
Yes,
empower them
yes.
to take
So
care of
I
it.
didn't answer your question. So yes, you're right. If they're 80% better, what that means is that they're mostly functional and they're able to move and do most things. They're only a little limited, and plus they now have experience using these tools that will ultimately get them the rest of the way home. Is that better? Okay. Thought I missed something. Yes, sir.
It's like a follow-up to what she was asked.
Yeah.
So assuming the patient is 1 out of 10.
Yes.
And the patient, you want to discharge the patient. And the patient, let's say 2 out of 10.
So they're really disabled.
Yes. So I'm talking about the pain
Oh,
scale.
the pain. I know it's flipped. It's confusing. I know.
Yeah, pain scale.
So their pain's really low.
Really low. And you were like, okay, you feel really good now. I will go through it one more time, then I'll discharge you. Then on the next visit, the patient is still at 2 out of 10. Would you be more courageous to still let go of the patient to go and do it themselves, or do it one more time so they get down to 1 out of 10?
So that is an excellent question. And it touches on a couple things. One is that improvement recoveries rarely happen on a straight line where every second is better than the last second. It's mostly ups and downs, but with net improvement as time is going by. So, and I tell patients, the way to tell if you're getting well is not whether you have pain or not. Having pain is irrelevant. All I care about is the trend. If your pain is trending lower as days go by, either in its severity, its frequency, or its duration, I still feel it at the same place. Bending over still hurts, but it used to be an 8, and then it was a 4, then it was a 2. That's a trend in the right way. And they will get so hung up on it. But doc, I still feel it. At worst, mild, moderate, or severe. Mild. Well, then ignore it. That's what I tell them, just like that. Ignore it. There are many things to worry about in life. That is not one of them. You are trending better. You've started running. You've been back to running. You could do that for 3 months. Look at all these things you're now able to do. It's hard human nature-wise to let go of, oh, why does this still hurt? I still have some pain. So yes, I will release them. To your example. Now, what I always tell patients is, going forward, as long as you're steadily improving in how you feel and function, great. You don't need me. If you plateau, or you start heading the wrong direction, and the tools you already have aren't fixing you, I want to know. And if you ever have questions about anything, or you get spooked by something, oh, what was that zingy thing? Or my toe went to sleep. That's the kind of thing I want to know about too. Email me or call me. So I give them all my email, my personal stuff. They don't use it as much as you think. It's buried.
A lot of times, what he's touching on here kind of goes into insurance reviews too, because whenever you're reviewed as from an insurance perspective or medical necessity perspective, a lot of times what you'll hear the insurance review doctor say is, based on the objectivity of the medical records and the condition, the patient should have been reassured of the benign nature of their complaints and encouraged to participate in a home exercise program. We don't have to solve all those problems. A lot of times it's better for the patient if you say, look, I know, but this is what's going on, it's not going to kill you, like he said. That's the first thing he starts out in his report of findings. And these are the things you need to do to control that. And look, you're back to running marathons. You think you're not going to have pain running a marathon? So it's our job to teach them that as well. Okay?
That's a great point about it. Yeah. And that whole side of things, there's a term for it, I forget what they call it, but it's the fear of re-injury.
Yeah. Fear avoidance behavior.
Fear avoidance behavior, yes, that's it. I mean, I'm not even kidding. Number one enemy to injury recovery. So you may have to drill it into them over and over and over. The other thing, and I tell patients, all of the big wins in rehab are going to come when you stay just outside your comfort zone, doing things that feel a little scary, a little painful. But here's what I'll promise you. If you do those things and you don't feel way worse afterwards, but you actually feel a little better, your confidence is going to rise and you're going to be much more likely to keep doing those things. Yes, sir. You let me know that.
No?
Okay.
What are your goals for first patient visit? Just like
You mean personal or goals for the
for the
patient?
patient, yeah, the goals for the patient.
Really, it's just, well, I mean, I'd say goal one, they don't feel significantly worse when they're leaving. But it would be making sure they understand the nature of their problem, the path to wellness, to getting well, and understand the tools that I'm going to give them. Because here's what's happening. Here's how it works. Each session with me is a mini class on how to fix themselves when they're not here. That's what I tell them. So each time they're there, they get new, different things that then get emailed to them, and they go into their basket of tools that they can use to maintain themselves. So I say that our body really, it's the vehicle our brain drives around, right? This is how I take my consciousness over here. And just like any vehicle, it has maintenance requirements. And if we let those slide, we end up broken down on the side of the road. But if we do that maintenance, which are these things we're talking about, that vehicle will look good, it will perform well, and it will last. And guess what? All these things are free. Stretching is free. Water is mostly free. I mean, sleep is free. All these things are free. Exercise is free. You don't have to go. You don't have to go into a gym. I mean, that's one way to exercise. So go from a new patient visit. They understand the overview of what we're going to do.
Good. I want to thank Dr. Bonnet.
Great questions, and I will say this real quick. Go ahead. I think asking questions is the single biggest sign of intelligence that I see when we have people shadowing us. Ask the questions. Never leave with an unanswered question. If you're shadowing, if you're in class, find out the answer to that thing. And the hunger for knowledge that's the main thing. That's what will get you to be a great doctor. It's keep asking.